And I think we're here. So, hello. Hello and welcome to my lab. Gosh, it might even be working. Nina, Sharifa, could you give me a message in the live chat and let me know if you can hear me? I'm hoping it's going to work. And that anyone would like to join in. Ooh, so I'm still just getting familiar with the blab. Excellent. So there are people out there and you guys can hear me. So that's great news. Very, very warm welcome to all of you. I think it's just brilliant that you've found the time to join me on this call today, including some people from some very far-flung parts of the world. So I believe that Stephen's on here from Australia, that there are people here from Indonesia. Oh, excellent. Miguel, you're dialing in. I think you just need to click a button to confirm that your audio and video are working, and then we'll be able to have an actual conversation. Do I need to accept you? Yes, there's the button. So I need to accept Miguel, and then we'll have the two of us on here, which will be great news because Miguel is a member of my Metaphor Mastery program, and we were in the private group there chatting about the fact we were going to do this blab, and he volunteered to be an active part of it, which is great. And if you're on the live chat and you've got a webcam and a headset, do feel free to join in too, so we can make this a larger conversation. I'm worrying that Miguel's trying to ring in and isn't succeeding. Miguel, say something and let me know if you're here. No, not working so far. Oh, Fernando, you're here. Excellent. Great to see you. Absolutely brilliant to see so many familiar names in the live chat window. It's very reassuring. So in the absence of voice contact from Miguel, let me invite any of you who've got a webcam and a headset to click the open seat call in. We can have up to me plus 3 other people on this thing, and if we can make it more of a conversation rather than just me blabbering, I think that will make it a whole lot more fun. Oh, who's this? It's Brian. Excellent. So let's see if this works. Brian Brannigan. So we've got Miguel Oliveira and Brian Brannigan. Brian, you're there.
Hi.
It works.
It works. It does work. Yeah, in my former life, I was a software test manager, so I always like playing with new technologies.
Oh, well, it's great to see you.
Thank you.
Whereabouts in the world are you?
I'm in Seattle, Washington, so it's just a little after dawn where I am.
Blimey.
Yeah, I saw your email first thing this morning, and I said, "Oh my gosh, here's a chance to find out about you and what you're doing."
Well, thanks so much.
I recently discovered you on Twitter, so really fascinated by what you're doing.
So, tell me what is it that's interesting you about me, about clean language, about all this stuff?
Well, I don't know anything about clean language other than don't swear. What the nuns taught me. So let me just kind of get the light a little different. What fascinates me about your work is the virtual collaboration, which is seems like an oxymoron to me, and that I after 25 plus years as working in high tech, I've had to work with teams in India and in Russia and Poland and they're more like work groups than they are teams. I think that there's a quality of being together that's different than being a team. So and that's causes, I think, the principal cause of a lot of mischief for people is that they expect a team when in fact they're really just in a work group and they're not co-located. So I want to know more about how to work with that. I'm getting a little feedback. So the thing I'm interested in is how to coach teams, work groups, and to be more effective in teleconference calls and collaboration technology.
Thank you. Just to clarify what's just happened, Stephen in Australia, I've just muted your microphone because I was convinced for some reason there's a message saying that poor internet signal from your microphone might be causing the problem with feedback that Brian was experiencing. So, and now you've dropped off the call. So I'm going to add Peter to the call as well. Hi Peter, how are you doing?
Hi Judy, yeah.
This is live. We are broadcasting to the world. And Miguel, can you speak? Can you join in? Not at the moment, by the sound of it. So let me pick up on what Brian was just saying. So Clean Language is the thing I'm known for. I'm known for this book, Clean Language, Revealing Metaphors and Opening Minds. And my favorite thing to do with it is to help virtual teams, so distributed teams, to work better together as a team. And the process I use is based on this book. Does that come out backwards to you, by the way, when you're looking at it?
No.
No, excellent. So From Contempt to Curiosity by Caitlin Walker, who has, for the last 10 or more years, been using Clean Language to help groups and teams to work better together. And what I did with some of her ideas was sort of take them and say, can this work in a virtual environment? And the answer, I think, pretty conclusively is yes. What I think is fantastic about Clean Language with groups is that it provides a way to help all the members of a team to really appreciate and understand the diversity that's in the team and make and draw the value from that diversity. I'm reading an amazing book at the moment called The Difference by a guy, I forgot, Scott Page or Page Scott. I'm not quite sure which way around it is. But he's talking about the mathematics of how it is that diverse groups solve problems more effectively than homogeneous groups. So software development in particular is a problem-solving occupation. So with software development teams, you always want to have a diverse group of people. So that means that I think that software developers are much more likely to work in virtual teams probably than other occupations. You want to have a diverse group of people working on the problems, but somehow that diversity has to be channeled into working together. And I think Clean Language has provided a really amazing tool for doing that by helping people to understand who their colleagues are at a much deeper level than just I'm Judy, I live in West London, I'm married, I have a grown-up stepson, that kind of what you might call boring information. With Clean Language, you dig down to a much deeper level. Hello, Tom. Welcome to the call. And you're upside down, or you were briefly. Now you're right way up and up again. Oh, we can't. Hi, Tom.
I'm new to this. Hi.
Yes. Hello. Welcome.
Thank you.
Are you also new to Clean Language?
I have your book. I have the Clean Language book. I've read it a couple of times. I'm not sure I fully understand it, but yes is the answer to your question.
Okay, so hopefully we'll be able to explain some of it now. Peter, would you like to say a little bit about how you use clean language and how you regard clean language?
How I regard it? Yeah, okay. Very specifically, I am focusing my efforts with clean language onto people in leadership roles. And I'm doing that for a couple of reasons. One is my background. I come from a big corporation where I had a leadership role with Hewlett Packard. So I've got some credibility in that space. The other thing is I believe that clean language is the sort of proliferation, if you want, of clean language is hindered by the fact that it can be used pretty much everywhere. It's about communication, and that's what we do. We communicate with each other. So the part of my challenge in wanting to work with clean is narrowing it down to an area where I can make a clean, clear proposition. And beneath that, my belief is that quality of life is quality of communication. And what I've realized with clean is that clean is taking us into that part of our ability to understand ourselves, the world we live in, and to understand other people. It's really getting down to the nuts and bolts, the real structure of thought and the way in which people influence one another. And I believe that at my time of life, I can be part of this clean movement and help people to improve the quality of their communication and the quality of their ability to influence each other positively by learning about metaphor. Mm-hmm. So was that the answer you were looking for?
Well, it's a great answer. Thank you. Caroline on the chat window is saying she can't hear you, Peter, but she can hear everybody else. This is a very interesting platform, isn't it? That people can hear or not hear in a sort of random way. But no doubt it will become clear. Let me just before I answer your question, Brian, that you've written in the chat window, which is give an example of clean language use. Let me give a bit of a framework of what are the kinds of contexts where clean language can be used. Because as Peter has said, it's about communication. It's about how people communicate with each other. It's also about how people communicate with themselves, if that makes sense. So there are three categories of places where people might use clean language. One is to coach themselves or to understand themselves better. One is to use it to work with an individual. So, for example, in the context of coaching or therapy or hypnotherapy, these kind of situations to help somebody to change. And the third category is with groups, to help groups to understand each other better and to work together better without collapsing into homogeneity, without collapsing into groupthink. So those are the three categories of places where people might use clean language. What clean language is a precision toolkit for exploring the metaphors which underpin people's thinking and that drive their behavior. So it's a set of questions that are used to find out about what somebody is thinking, feeling, describe their inner world. Brian, can I test something on you as an example of clean language in use? Would you mind answering a couple of clean language questions for me? Oh, I can't hear you, Brian. Have you muted yourself?
I have, and now I'm unmuted.
Now you're back. Okay. So an example of how I might use clean language with a group or a team, and I wanted to help them understand each other better, I might start by asking, and I'm asking you now, when you are working at your best, think about a time when you were working your best. Mm-hmm. When you're working at your best, you're like what?
Let me see. So I'm like a member of a choir.
A member of a choir. What kind of choir?
A community chorale.
A community chorale. And is there anything else about that choir?
It's all ages, men and women, and we're preparing a big community concert.
Mm-hmm. So all ages, men and women, preparing a big community concert, like a community choir, community chorale, like that. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Let me now turn to Tom. Tom, when you are working at your best, you're like what?
When you asked Brian the question, my mind went to a steam engine for some peculiar reason.
A steam engine? What kind of steam engine?
One that chugs along relentlessly.
Chugs along relentlessly. And is there anything else about that steam engine when it chugs along relentlessly?
It means when I'm at my best, I can continue to do what I do well.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Peter, can I ask you as well? When you're working at your best, you're like what?
Well, I've been asked this question before, and the thing that comes to mind is I feel like I'm out on my rollerblades, just free to go anywhere, no friction, just a sense of freedom, really.
Mm-hmm. On your rollerblades, no friction, sense of freedom. Is there anything else about that?
Yeah, I feel very alive.
Feel very alive.
I really get a lot of pleasure from learning things.
So when Peter's working at his best, it's like he's out on his rollerblades, no friction. When Tom's at his best, he's like a steam train, relentless. And when Brian's working at his best, it's like he's in a community chorale. Isn't that interesting? Mm-hmm. And do you see how by hearing about the metaphors that are underpinning their thinking, we're discovering all sorts of interesting things about them and getting a sense of how they do what they do. And of course, if we had time to do a lot more exploring of these metaphors, we get a load more information. Brian, does that answer your question?
Yeah. And then what's the next step? I mean, how do you make it actionable? I mean, I understand that beneath it all, it's kind of, it reveals a value system, mm-hmm. For each of us, so mine is, So how do you take it to action and then continue to kind of refine it as you go?
Yeah, one of the things that I think is particularly valuable about using Clean Language as a team development tool is that it forces the development of 3 specific skills by team members. Listening, asking questions, and speaking up about what's true for them. Now, software development teams are pretty much my favorite set of people to work with. And you'll nearly always find that every individual in a software development team has a strength amongst those 3 and a very particular weakness amongst those 3. They vary between people, but everybody has a strength and a weakness of the 3. And in working with these questions and getting people used to asking the questions, listening to the answers, and speaking their own truth, you force them to develop all 3 of those skills alongside. Now, once those skills are developing, you're getting into the real nitty-gritty of what makes fantastically innovative, problem-solving, creative teams. There's a lovely book called Collective Genius by a team from MIT, which talks about some of the most creative, innovative organizations in the world and what are the distinguishing features. And one of the main features is this ability to do all those 3 things well. ask questions, listen, and speak up and advocate for a point of view. So when I'm working with a team, I'm developing all those skills. I'm getting them to know each other at a new level, and I'm helping them to establish new norms of communication, to figure out the ways that are most effective for them as a team to communicate, to interact, and to make stuff happen. Now, I'm noticing that I've been carefully ignoring what's going on in the live chat window, but I noticed there's quite a lot of text there, and I'm realizing I ought to know what's there.
Yeah, you could use a co-pilot in the future.
Yes, I'm learning that very quickly. So Werazik, I've no idea how to pronounce your name, and I don't actually know your first name, so I'm not recognizing your name at the moment. So I'm reading all the things you've said, and it looks really interesting. He's saying that he shared the Lazy Jedi questions. So the questions you just heard, what kind of, and is there anything else about, are nicknamed the 2 Lazy Jedi questions. And this guy says he shared them with some computer science students, which they can ask human resources people during recruitment interviews, and they proved very powerful. Also very helpful during the requirements development process. Absolutely, the requirements development using the Lazy Jedi questions, absolutely spot on. Anything where you need to gather information from another person, these questions can be really, really useful. So in sales, if you need to scope out what a person actually wants, these questions can be useful. In human resources interviews, recruitment interviews, in journalistic interviews. My background was news journalism, and I still do a podcast a couple of times a month, and I use the clean language questions to find out how people do their collaboration. They've also been used quite extensively in market research interviewing, and also in community research, finding out what people really think about proposals for development in a community. They've also been used in purely academic research. So there's been some really interesting studies done about how you can clean up your research interviews. The clean language, by the way, was created by a psychotherapist, a guy called David Grove, who died a few years ago. He named it clean language. I wish he hadn't, because it's not it's not an even unique name. There's 2 or 3 other things that are called clean language. But what he meant by clean language was that the questions contained the minimum number of presuppositions and judgments and metaphors. So that's what's particularly designed in the clean language questions. And this guy, Werazik, I wish I knew how to pronounce his name, says the clean language questions, in particular, incredible tools for ICT people so they can ask simple questions in an organized and unintrusive way. He's also been on a workshop on clean language and clean space by Bojina Piskevich. Yes, he says his lesson is that live interaction and guidance from a clean language coach and the interactive process of revealing a metaphor are crucial. I think that's really, really interesting input. Thank you. Now, Fernando, who's been doing some interesting work about using clean language in the context of a theatrical production. He's also doing some stuff about mentalism and hypnotism, which is great. He says it's great to use it when working with dreams, helping people to remember dreams more than they thought, and helps them to give dreams some meaning. Ooh, how interesting. Yes, absolutely. I often ask myself a couple of clean language questions when I wake from a dream, just because they're automatically the questions that spring to mind for me. Is this making sense? Tom, Brian?
Yes.
Tom?
Not at the moment, but keep going. I'm interested. Enjoying it.
Okay.
I mean, I would maybe roll back one little piece and talk. I remember in one of your posts, you talk about how you were influenced by George Lakoff's Metaphors We Live By, and which was a really impactful book for me as well. And so why, could you go back a little bit about clean language and metaphors and the importance of metaphors in your work?
I'd absolutely love to, because metaphor is so important to me and to clean language. So you can use the clean language questions without reference to metaphor. It's absolutely no requirement to use them in relation to metaphor. But when they were designed for exploring people's metaphors. And I believe, though I never heard it directly from him, that David himself was profoundly influenced by that same book, Lakoff and Johnson's Metaphors We Live By. I read it myself as a teenager, and it was like, boom, absolutely, this makes perfect sense. Why has nobody said this before? So when in later life I came across clean language, it was just a perfectly natural fit for me. What David had realized is that metaphor is the native language of the unconscious mind, that we think in metaphor outside of our awareness. We think continuously by comparing and contrasting the things that we learn about and discover on our path through life. And the metaphors that spill out in our language are a consequence of the metaphors in our unconscious thought, which is the opposite way to how people thought about it even 30, 40 years ago. People assumed that we would consciously come up with a metaphor. And that's how come they came to be in the language. So Shakespeare had sat there scratching his head and eventually, and Juliet is the sun. That's not how it works. In fact, the metaphors are in our thoughts before they're in our language. So we're using something like 6 metaphors per minute in ordinary English. Peter shared a fascinating link the other day. He wrote a blog post about it, saying that in academic literature, the proportion of words that could be described as metaphorical was something like 18%, and in casual conversation it was about 7%. It depends what you count as metaphorical, because various things could be described as metaphor or couldn't describe, depends how you think about it. But certainly the metaphors are scattered all over the language, and they can't be there by conscious choice. Now, when I'm talking about this, I get all muddled up because I start hearing the metaphors coming out of my own mouth, and I start tripping over my words. Some of you guys who are listening to this might have been spotting my metaphors as I said them. So metaphors scattered all over the landscape, yes. Tripping over my words, comparing my words to something that I could literally trip over. Metaphors spilling out. These are all metaphors. They're comparing words to other things, to something you could fall over, to something you could scatter, to something that could spill, a liquid. So these metaphors are there all the time in our language and in our thoughts. And what David Grove realized was that provided an astonishing thing, which was that you could use the metaphor, if you like, as a hotline to the unconscious mind and to aspects of the person that they were not used to talking about. Of course, David's role was in psychotherapy, was to help people to change. And clean language is a standalone change process. You can use it on its own to help people to make significant changes in their lives, and in particular, in the way they think about their lives. But it's also much more than that. It has this depth of understanding of how people think. Now, I'm being distracted by the chat window where Miguel is saying he can't see or hear Brian or Tom. Frederic is saying that his company's blocked Blab by the firewall, so he can't see anybody. But the mysterious and it has just told me that his name is Voldemar, so that's great. Hello, Voldemar. It's much easier to pronounce. And he's in Warsaw. And he's been using Clean Language for value stream mapping for process optimization and reorganization.
Good.
Okay, and Pilar is saying that if you've got a choice of browsers, you use Chrome to everybody who's having any difficulty. I'm going to give Miguel one more go to see if I can get him live onto the call. So, questions. Where are you at the moment with this stuff? Brian, does that answer your question about where the metaphor comes into it all?
Right. And again, I think this is really key for, and I'm really intrigued by it, for when working with culturally diverse teams. If by nature, like a virtual team would most likely be in India, China, Latin America. So you're working with people from these rich cultural backgrounds, and then through a very thin pipe of maybe at like a telephone conference call, and you're just trying to get through the basics of the transactions about what's being done, and not understanding the thinking that's happening in the different locations at the same time.
And this interesting thing about metaphor being the native language of the unconscious mind appears to be true across all cultures, across all languages. So while we may not be able to directly share the words for our metaphors, we can share the metaphor. So we can hold up a picture and say, I'm like a steam train.
Yeah.
Tom, where are you with all this? What's your next question?
Well, you've just answered my question. I am living in Spain. So I am learning Spanish and wondering if Spanish was the same as English. I haven't mastered English in terms of noticing metaphors and being able to use them to my advantage and to other people's advantage. And I was just wondering if Spanish was laden the same way as English is. And you've answered that. Thank you.
If only Miguel could join the call, and I'm getting very frustrated that he can't, he'd be able to tell us exactly. Fernando?
Absolutely.
Oh, Pilar, if I just cancel Miguel, Pilar, can you jump on? Oh, she says she can't. Fernando, can you join? Oh, Pilar went to the dentist earlier. Fernando, can you join the call? Oh, Vida's joining. Excellent. She will be able to tell us about other languages, I would guess. Oh, Fernando says crappy Wi-Fi where he is. He thinks that Spanish is shorter on metaphors. I don't think that's true. I've had enough exposure to people who do know Spanish to say that it's Pilar, is that same thing as in it's shorter on metaphors, or it's got the same number? Same as English, says Pilar. I think part of it is when you first come across Clean Language, it takes a while to tune into the metaphors that people are using. Vida, can you hear us? And can you speak? Say something, Vida. Because I think you are connected to the call, but I don't think I can. Well, we can't see you yet. Oh, well. Yeah, so lots of conversation going on in the chat window. It's very difficult to keep track of everything at the same time. You're absolutely right. There may be a co-pilot on this call would have been a good idea.
I've seen that technique used by other people leading webinars. You know, one person is on camera and the other person's off reading the chat line, and so
so it serves me right for.
Well, you're jumping in and having fun and learning as you go.
Meanwhile, the chat window has descended into Spanish, and I can't follow any of it.
Well, I'm monitoring it too. So, could you describe like a client engagement that you had where you worked with clean language and and you know, maybe what would interest me is like a distributed agile team, you know, because agile software really requires more like daily interaction, and not just the how you use the language, but how you overcome some of the technology barriers and actually use them more effectively. And you know, my editorial comment on that is just that, you know, I just see with virtual teleconference call meetings is that, you know, people have, I mean, when they have real team meetings with people in place, they're kind of sloppy in how they run the meeting, and they're being in one room kind of makes up for the difference. But when you're on a teleconference call, you almost have to be more rigorous, and how your speaking lands in someone else's listening, you know, 5 time zones away. So do you have a case study that you could share with us?
I don't have an agile team one. I would so love to get an opportunity to work over a long period of time with an agile team. I don't have one. I've tended to have smaller chunks of work.
Okay, well, whatever, you know.
The best story I've got I can share was I was working with a team in the I've forgotten the name of their team, but they were a bunch of logisticians and accounts people. And they were spread all the way from Bosnia to Guatemala via Geneva. And the sort of presenting problem, the boss says, I can't get the team to talk to each other. They put everything through me, and it means I'm spending my life as a glorified postman. I can't, but what I need is for the team to work as a team. So what we did was, over the course of 10 weeks, we met up once a week on a video call and worked through these issues about how do you, well, first get to know each other, then what are the best ways for them to use the communication tools they've got, and which ones do they need to add. So the most exciting moment was actually when we used video conference calling for the first time. Most of them had never seen each other. And it was like, wow. Now, that seems a very trivial thing. And yet it took me, an outside consultant, to say, look, just try it. I know you're nervous of using video conferencing. Nobody thinks they look good on video. But try it. It makes a big difference. And then over the course of a few weeks, they really started to get to know each other, to start to open up to each other. They were developing that kind of trust, that kind of empathy, that kind of, oh, now it is safe to share this kind of information, to share the fact there's a problem, to share the fact that there's, you know, that I don't agree with what you've just said or what the boss has just said. And over the time, they developed the relationships that they needed to be able to say, actually, email isn't working in this situation. What else can we try? Actually, a phone conference doesn't do it. Let's use video for this. And the awareness to go that when a misunderstanding, when you start to spot a misunderstanding, move up the chain in terms of what system you're using. If you're getting signs of disagreement in email, let's move to live chat. If you're getting discomfort in live chat, let's move to the phone. If the phone isn't working, particularly if it's a group call, use video conference. And they sorted that out for themselves. It wasn't about me telling them, except at the start, saying you must try video conference first up. Beyond that, I didn't have to tell them. They figured it out for themselves. Vida, are you there? Hello.
I am. This is the third machine I've used. I had my laptop and finally got through. But I've been listening now for the last couple of minutes.
Great to see you.
Happy to see you. Hello.
These are everybody. I think there's something. I'm not sure. There's a lot of people listening to this blab. So, but these are Brian and Tom. So you can do the immediate introductions. Vida, do you have a question about how clean language and metaphor can be used, or do you have a comment?
I have a comment. From experience, and since I started on this journey, it can be used in almost everything and anything. It isn't something that's foreign or out of our space. You just, when we started, the simple things as what kind of bread is that bread? And is there anything else in the bread? It doesn't have to be the specific clean language question. You can change it, you can adapt it. So that rigidity gives you that freedom to keep it simple and not to allow it to sound as if it's some sort of questioning tactic as such. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's been quite a revelation, because I was reading that someone said as well, they thought clean language was something to do with swearing. And usually when I say clean language to anyone, and they look at me as if, what are you on about? It's nothing to do with swearing. It's totally keeping things pure, i.e. you're listening and just giving back the question with whichever words the person has used, be it a client or a friend. It doesn't have to be in a client, it can be arena, it can be in any respect.
So in your opinion, why is clean language useful? What is it about it that makes it useful?
It is because you are listening to the person who is asking the question or wanting something understood, or wanting themselves understood. You're not contaminating it with anything to do with you or advice or anything as such. What you do by asking the questions and repeating the words that the person has used, at that point, they really think you're listening because you are repeating their words, and you allow them to go into their deeper subconscious mind. And at the end of it doesn't happen always in a flash, but it can also happen very quickly. They find the answer, they find the solution. If you give them advice, there are a few that may take the advice for a few seconds, minutes, hours, or a day. But if they find a solution themselves, it's much longer lasting. Mm-hmm. And that is really the big revelation about clean language.
And you're thinking here mostly about one-to-one interactions, a coaching or a hypnotherapy kind of context.
Yes, but it can also be used in groups, as we have seen with our groups, with the inner circle and the metaphor mastery, etc. And when you have client, facilitator and observer, you learn even more.
So Vida's a member of my metaphor mastery program. I'm going to drop a link to that in the chat window. If anybody would like to find out a whole lot more about clean language and its practical applications, well, I would recommend it, wouldn't I? But that link... metaphor judyrees.co.uk/metaphor mastery discount offer will get you to a page where you can get the metaphor mastery program super cheap for a limited period only. It's one of the things I love about that program is that it basically brings together people from all over the world who are interested in this stuff. I've recorded a bunch of video classes that I did, but the real meat of the thing happens in the Facebook group we have, where we're all talking about what everybody's getting up to with it, and also in our monthly online meetings, like a bit like this, but on Zoom, which I think is a little bit more stable and a little bit less random. Brian, you had a question.
Well, it was more of a comment from what Vida was saying about they asking questions and repeating language that from the responses you get. And what that brings up for me is that what that process does is reveals the internal metaphor that the person is using. Again, what's so valuable for me in Lakoff and Johnson's metaphors we live by is that metaphors both reveal and conceal, and that sometimes what I've found is that a metaphor that I'll have will stop working because I've come up against a limitation of it, and I won't know why until I have that kind of conversation that Vita talks about, and then said, again, my favorite point in the book was the whole thing about revealing that the underlying metaphor for argument in the West, in Western thinking, is war. So you win a point, you destroy the other person's evidence, and so that's why you can have civil discourse that gets very contentious. But they open up that in other cultures, the underlying metaphor is more of discovery. So you can have people with different views, and you're not fighting each other. So you don't get into an argument about who gets to be right about what they see.
And then that experience of just everybody's going to have a different perspective. That's just the way it is.
Yeah,
it's inherent in the metaphor.
Yeah, and that's why I think what Vita was saying is so important. Is that especially in teams, everyone is, and even more so with virtual teams, is that all they know is what they know from where they know it, multiple time zones away, and they don't have the interaction, at the coffee machine or going out for tea or a pint after work, where they get to experience people in different ways, and they get insights into what their metaphors might be. So that's why I think that I really see value in what you're bringing is this gets at a way to understand what is the shape of someone's thinking, and even more so, what is the shape of their listening, so you can speak into it rather than speak at it.
Vita.
I think as well, the metaphors are unique to each of us as individuals. And when we realize that we're perhaps not singing from the same hymn sheet, then there is where listening comes in handy, and we realize as individuals, they meant something totally different. Why did I take it so personally? Things to that effect. And you also just mentioned, Brian, about reading the book. And sometimes the metaphor perhaps doesn't have the same resonance with you. And that is because I feel you have come to some sort of understanding of what that metaphor meant to you. Did I understand correctly? So now that you've understood it, it's just, you move on.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, and so that the metaphor works in this context, I'm just in a different context where the metaphor isn't working, and I need to let that go in this context to move over to, find something else that works, so I can take care of what I care about.
One of the things that happens, it's really fascinating when it happens when any clean language facilitator is doing one-on-one change work, purely just using the clean language process, is that somebody will be describing their metaphor for something. And as they describe it and are asked the questions and they keep on finding more information about it and they're exploring it, it just changes. It's not that they sit there and change it. So, if I took so say there was a wall, they'd go, that's not a very helpful metaphor. I'll take the wall down and replace it with a fence. Yeah. It's not like that. it's much more, they'll go, oh, and there'll be an expression of surprise. And they're like, oh, the wall's gone. And that's when it gets really, really, I suppose, a little bit woo-woo, because we imagine, and you're well read, you know that this is not literally true, but we always imagine that our rational selves are in control of ourselves and what we're doing and who we are and all that stuff. But actually that's not true at all. The rational you, the person who thinks he's driving the bus, is not driving the bus at all. He is merely narrating the story about what's going on.
Yeah, that reminds me of the book Switch by Chip and Dan Heath, about, they use the story of the elephant rider, the elephant, and the path, and that rational mind is really just the rider on top of the elephant, and if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense to me. I wrote a blog post a few years ago talking about how clean language, so taking that rider and elephant metaphor, so the rider is the conscious mind, the elephant is the unconscious mind. Clean language is a tool for helping two riders to communicate more effectively, other people's riders to communicate with other people's elephants, and also the rider to communicate with its own elephant.
Yeah.
And vice versa. So you've got this, so say we've got two riders, two elephants, you've got this way, and this way.
Yeah. Whatever you do, don't scare the elephant.
Don't want rampaging elephants around.
Oh my God. Don't be provoking other people's elephants and your own.
But what's so lovely about clean language as an approach is that when used well, I mean, every questioning strategy can be used badly, but when clean language is used in an elegant way, it doesn't frighten the elephant.
Mm-hmm.
It makes the elephant feel really cozy and comfortable, relaxed, and willing to talk. And it does that because the questions acknowledge what the elephant has just said. They allow the elephant to speak its truth in its own language. And that just makes everything easier.
Yeah.
Vida.
Judy just used the word elegant, and I would just like to say at this point, like everything else in life, it is not really difficult. All it takes is practice and practice and practice. And by doing that, that is where the elegance, and you also said that you can use questions incorrectly. That is so. But in order, we have to sometimes make incorrect mistakes, that's not correct. But in order to become buoyant and fluent, and that's where the elegance comes in. And I'd also like to be cheeky and say to both of you gentlemen and anybody else who's listening, the first time I saw Judy using clean language, I was doing my master practitioner course. Now, this young man offered himself up as a volunteer to have her practice with him. And I knew the problem. He had confided in me. And I sat there listening to him describe something, the way he described it, the way that Judy so elegantly knew exactly what and whereabouts and all of these things. And he was a totally different person once Judy had finished. And afterwards, he went out celebrating. I still keep in contact with him. And that problem does not exist. It's something that had happened to him and a brother as well. And that is where I was sold in clean language. And maybe saying I was sold on it, I was just totally, and I just love it and apply it in anything and everything I do, because it is fundamentally, it is simple.
And that night, it's interesting. It's sort of bringing tears to my eyes thinking about it, because I knew that something very big had happened for that chap. But what I never knew, and this is one of the other interesting things about clean language, is I never actually knew what he was talking about. We only talked in terms of metaphor. He described his thing in terms of metaphor, and I worked only with the metaphor. So I could speculate on what was actually what he was talking about, but it would be pure speculation. All I know is that his metaphor made a significant shift, a very significant shift, and he reported an enormous change. I think somewhere in my website that there's a testimonial video from him saying that it made a big difference, and things have changed significantly since that day.
And for me, it was the words that he was using, his metaphors to describe them. And this is quite a few years ago now. Tar was the word that he used. And there was Judy using the questions, and it was like witnessing when people say a miracle, and a miracle did happen to him because it was all to do with what he had in his subconscious mind. And it was totally effectful.
Yeah, so Pilar is saying in the chat window that it sounds like a very safe way of having difficult conversations. It can be an extremely safe way of having difficult conversations, particularly coaching type conversations. One colleague used to work as a coach in, I forget exactly where, but probably Camberley or somewhere. Hereford. It was one of those places where it's a military town. And he used to occasionally get clients who would come to him to say, "Can you coach me? But I can't tell you what it's about, because if I told you what I was talking about, I'd have to kill you." And he would say, "Yes, I can coach you. As long as you can give me a metaphor for the thing, I can coach you without knowing the content." So in that sense, yes, it can be a really safe way of having difficult conversations. These are not the problems you're looking for. It can be a bit of a Jedi mind trick, and it's great fun to do that kind of Jedi mind trick stuff, but it doesn't have to be that. It can be everything from a very everyday tool for finding out a bunch of stuff, like Vida was saying, find what kind of bread is this? Is there anything else about that bread? Really, really straightforward. Whereabouts is the bread shop? Straightforward, no metaphor involved, nothing complicated. Right through to this Jedi mind trick, amazing, full-on content-free change tool, and a bunch of other things in between. A way of helping groups and teams to work together better, a way of group coaching, a way of helping people to buy and sell more effectively, ways of gathering information, all different kinds of things. Now, I didn't explicitly say so, but I had in mind that this would be an hour-long call. So we're 2 minutes to the hour. Is there anything that anyone else would like to ask or say before we finish?
Could you repeat the 3 things that you learned from Collective Genius? It was ask questions.
It was listening, asking questions, and speaking up about your own stuff. She calls it advocacy.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else? Any other questions?
On speaking up, I'm going to speak up. Brian giggled when you said about the course, joining the course. And I'm going to say, Judy is such a fair person. And she has these reduced rates, etc. She looks after all of us. We are like her little, little beings that she's like a mum watching over all of us, and she wants us to aspire and be really good. It'll be the best investment that you can make. I can't afford very, very much myself, like most of us, especially in this day and age. But whenever I can see that there is something and I can make it work for me, I am doing it, and I have absolutely no regrets whatsoever. Do it. People from all walks of life as well, because fundamentally we are doing these things every day. Many things when we're born, we've got it in us. All we need to do is to find the tools that will help you to come out, make us better individuals, work better in teams, exactly what you're looking for, because I can't say anything about Tom, because Tom is very quiet and just listening intently, but exactly what you are looking for as well to take it through to your work or your teams to get the best out of yourself and with them as well. And then work as a team, everything is better.
Well, when are the calls? Because like it's 7 a.m. here, it's 8 a.m. here, and it's 4 p.m. there. So how do you manage the time zones?
Yeah, so the bulk of the materials in the course are recorded. You can do them at your own pace.
Okay.
The participants are spread all over the world. So if you want to find people to practice with and talk to, you can match up with people in your own time zone. We do a monthly masterclass call, which normally happens at 7 p.m. UK time. So that's 3 hours later than ours. It's good. It's good for America. It's absolutely rubbish for Australia. And that's one of the challenges I'm working on at the moment, is to help find ways for the Australian contingent to join in. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
And
I just signed up.
Great. Thank you.
Well, I've been following you for a while. So as I said, like when I saw the email that you were doing this, it's like, okay, hurry up, get breakfast, drink my coffee, get on the call. So.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm definitely going to be doing more of these blabs. In particular, I'm intending to do a live morning of client work. So if you're curious about how this process works as a one-on-one coaching process, and you want to see things like Vida was describing, that young man having that experience, we're going to be doing that on the morning of the 29th of April. Now, again, Brian, I'm afraid the timing might be a bit dreadful for you. But we're going to start with that one, and we might well repeat it. So the morning of the 29th of April, UK time, put it in your diary, details to follow. If you're not already signed up to my newsletter, that's the place to make sure you get information. You'll find that on judyrees.co.uk. Go to any of the blog posts and you'll see how to sign up for the newsletter. And with all of that, we'd better finish. Thanks so much, everyone, for being part of it.
Thank you.
It's been a fantastic experience.
Bye,
Tom. Definitely going to do it again. Thanks, Brian and Tom and Vida and Peter and Miguel and everyone who's been part of the live stream. It's been brilliant. Thanks a lot.
Thank
See
you
you again next time.
Bye-bye.
Yes.
Oh, there.